Hi, everyone. It is 4 o'clock here in New York. I'm Alicia Menendez in for Nicole Wallace on a very busy Friday. We begin with New York Judge Arthur Engoron dealing a body blow to the Trump business empire, ruling that the Trump Organization must pay more than $350 million in penalties. That Donald Trump cannot do business in the state of New York for 3 years. His two adult sons, Donald Trump Jr. and Eric Trump, they are barred from doing business for 2 years. Now, to put this all in context, New York Attorney General Tish James had asked Engoron for $370 million in penalties. The judge also extended the use of an independent monitor to oversee the Trump Organization. In his ruling, Engoron says, quote, defendants' complete lack of contrition and remorse borders on pathological. They're accused only of inflating asset values to make more money. The documents prove this over and over again. Defendants did not commit murder or arson. They did not rob a bank at gunpoint. Donald Trump is not Bernard Madoff. Yet defendants are incapable of admitting the error of their ways. This court is not constituted to judge morality. It is constituted to find facts and apply the law. In this particular case, in applying the law to the facts, the court intends to protect the integrity of the financial marketplace and thus the public as a whole. Defendants' refusal to admit error, indeed to continue it, according to the independent monitor, constrains this court to conclude that they will engage in it going forward unless judicially restrained. In a statement, the Trump Organization calls the ruling a, quote, gross miscarriage of justice. And that is where we start today with MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin, plus New York Times investigative reporter Sue Craig, and president of the National Action Network and host of Politics Nation here on MSNBC, Reverend Al Sharpton. Also joining us, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General and former U.S. Attorney Harry Litman. Friends, I love that you were all on your phones moments before those introductions because we are still reading in. Sue, you have followed this business more closely than anyone. What does all of this mean for the business?
To even say it's a body blow may be an understatement. I mean, this is a massive seismic decision today for them. And when it comes down to it, I always think about Donald Trump. The language he speaks is money. This is a lot of money, and potentially now on top of what he was facing in the penalty with E. Jean Carroll, which is, in excess of $80 million. Plus, there was a separate one for $5 million. There's things going on at the IRS where he could be facing a penalty of $100 million. We don't have a lot of visibility into that, but these are just stacking up like flights at the airport. We don't really know how much cash he has on hand. There's been, at one point he said he had $400 million, and there's documents that have been filed with the court that says he could have maybe had in that range at some point. We don't know. But during the presidency, one thing that wasn't talked about a lot was some of the asset sales that he has been undertaking. He sold two operating licenses that he had, one at a golf course in New York. There's another one at a hotel in Washington. He got $139 million for that. And he's also been quietly selling condos and buildings that he owns in New York. He sold a mansion that he owned in LA. He's got another one in the Caribbean up for sale. I think in a way, when I see it, you see that he's selling it not necessarily for this day, because he also lost a lot of business when he decided to go into the White House. A lot of the licensing agreements that he had went away. But you can imagine that they're spinning up there. We don't even know if they have enough to meet this, but he has been trying to get money, and he has a bunch of money. He has a bunch of businesses that also lose money, and we've seen now decades of his taxes that he's often putting money into those businesses just to keep them afloat.
Lisa, let's step back. Yeah. Talk about the factors that go into this decision, and especially the math, sort of comparing what it was that A.G. James asked for and what it was that Engoron ruled.
So with respect to the monetary penalties here, what Judge Engoron awarded comes really close to what the Attorney General asked for. She was essentially asking for money that she said were ill-gotten profits in 4 different buckets. The first bucket was interest that she said that the Trump Organization and the Trumps fraudulently saved by not disclosing their true financial state. The second bucket had to do with the sale of the old post office lease in Washington, D.C., where they operated the Trump International Hotel that's no longer operating under their name. The third bucket has to do with the sale of a lease, basically to operate a golf course, a municipal golf course here in New York called Ferry Point. They made $60 million from that. And the fourth bucket was money that they gave to two other defendants here, Alan Weisselberg, the former CFO, and Jeffrey McConney, who's the former controller. Both of them were given generous severance agreements when they parted ways with the Trump organizations. But those severance agreements, as Mr. Weisselberg testified, for example, were conditioned on their not voluntarily cooperating with anyone who would have any claim against the Trumps, the Trump organization, or anyone really affiliated with their organizations. In other words, they were being paid not to play. And today in the award, for example, Judge Engoron claws back from Alan Weisselberg $1 million of that $2 million severance agreement.
So we're going to continue to talk about Weisselberg. But first, Rev, I want to make sure that I get you. And we're going to spend a lot of time talking about what this means legally, what this means for Trump's business. What does this mean for the Trump brand? What does this mean for the Trump candidacy?
I think that it is devastating for the Trump brand. He built his whole brand as this savvy, shrewd, unmatchable businessman. We must remember he didn't grow up formally in New York politics. He grew up selling that he was the great Gatsby in real life. And that's gone now. I don't care how he sells stuff and makes the bond appeal list and it'll go through the courts. It's scattered now. You have a judge that says, yes, you're a fraud. You have another judge that says, yes, you sexually harassed a woman. And he's facing a trial at the end of next month. Imagine picking a jury when everybody just heard he owes hundreds of millions of dollars and he's a fraud. And he's got to pick a jury in that climate. So I think the brand is gone. Now, politically, the MAGA enthusiasts will be geared up. This will be something for them to rally around. But I think that they will start being diluted in numbers, because how do you put a guy like this in the White House again? Expanding a base of independent voters. Independent voters now, seeing this verdict tonight or seeing the order by the judge, many of them that may have been in a gray area is going to shift over. The guy is a fraud, guilty of sexual harassment, on his way to court about paying off a dance or whatever we want to call the young lady. And still, we may see him on trial in Georgia and in Washington, D.C. I mean, I think that what this case, the decision does is it puts cold water in our face to really make everybody wake up and say, this guy's really in trouble. We're talking about almost $500 million, and a judge called him a fraud. This is no longer some byline to get viewers on cable TV. This is real. And if you don't believe it, talk to Donald Trump tonight.
You want to jump to?
I was just going to say it stings. I mean, this is a lot of money, and there's, you can be a billionaire or not, but it's a lot of money. And most people who even are a billionaire, if he is a billionaire, don't just have $400 million, and it's more than that because there's other judgments just lying around. So he's going to have to figure out a way, if he is going to appeal, he's going to have to put the money up in order to appeal. He's either going to have to put cash up, or he's going to have a bond, and he's going to have to arrange that bond with a financial institution that sees all this litigation risk and sees him heading into a criminal trial. It is rough.
Harry Litman, I want to get your response to today's ruling overall, but I also want you to pick up where Sue left off. Where does this go from here?
Fine. Let me give my response first. The money is really big, as Sue says, and may strain to the point of liquidity, but bigger than that, or at least as big. One, loss of brand, as the Rev was just talking about. This is his whole life project, is the Trump brand. And two, loss of control. So Engoron really hammered him in terms of his ability to do business and strengthened the monitor system that was already in place with Judge Jones. He's not going to be able to write a check or give a tip, it seems to me, unless a monitor approves it. What a come down and what humiliation for a man who all his life has done exactly what he wanted to. Where does it go from here? Very important point, because all this goes on appeal, and it's joined with something he had done before, Engoron, which was to strip the sort of certificates of completion, which is another form of a corporate death penalty. It goes to the appellate division, the intermediate New York court. That takes a while. And it, some of the
define a while, Harry.
Okay, 18 months till it's all over, but the money has to be put up first, as many people were saying. So the hit remains. The bottom line, and as does the control loss, the monitor, she is in place now. But the actual sort of divestiture of all power, that's going to go through an appellate process and a discretionary process one level above to the New York Court of Appeals.